In September 1989, a man walked into his former workplace and opened fire with an AK-47. He killed 8 people before turning the gun on himself. The survivors say Prozac made Joseph Westbecker do it and are suing Eli Lilly. It was the first civil case to reach court. Peter Breggin was the expert witness.
And that it would not have happened without Prozac.
Eli Lilly, though, presented evidence that Westbecker had a history of psychiatric problems, including violence, before taking Prozac.
And he would be talking about how many people he wanted to kill.
They also presented scientific evidence, including an FDA investigation which showed no link between Prozac and violence.
The disease itself is associated with suicidality and violence. That's part of depression. But if you treat it with Prozac, you decrease the risk of both suicidality and violence and aggressive behavior.
The verdict of the jury is as follows. We, the jury, do not find Eli Lilly and Company at fault. Signed, Robert Hollyfield.
Over and over again, the Prozac defense has been tried and failed. And in the one civil case where Prozac was alleged to have an impact on some violent actions on the part of an individual, a jury upheld the notion that there's no relationship between Prozac and violence.
I don't think it's Prozac that's making for violence. I think often we've underestimated violence as a piece of depression in certain patients, particularly in male patients, and I think we've tried to blame Prozac for that. I don't think it's Prozac's fault.
People have very carefully reviewed the literature about all antidepressants. And the original report was a very small group of people who were already terribly ill, I think all of whom had been suicidal in the past. And we do know that Prozac, like some other drugs, can make people restless and jumpy and irritable. And if you feel restless and jumpy and irritable, and you add that to already being depressed and maybe a little suicidal or a little irritable, it can push people over the edge. Sort of like 800 cups of coffee might make someone who's a little explosive very explosive.
What is the right treatment of major depression? And that, I think, is fairly uncontroversial. It can be made controversial if you look to extreme enough people. But I think these medicines are, clearly helpful to have in the doctor's bag of tricks in terms of treating major depression. The other question, which I think is more controversial and therefore more interesting, is what do you do about all these minor conditions? And is it right to use medication? Let's say we can do it. Maybe we can, maybe we can't, to enhance someone's confidence or to make someone a little less irritable and less compulsive, when that person has a condition that throughout all of human history would have been considered a normal human variant.
It's a question being asked by psychologist Lauren Alloy at Temple University, who is studying how depressed people view themselves.
I think this whole line of work really challenges our notions about what depression and perhaps other forms of mental illness may be like. It's long been believed that mental illness is related to distorted perceptions and thinking, particularly in the case of depression, to overly pessimistic or negative beliefs about the self.
What she's found is that it's normal so-called healthy people who often suffer distorted perceptions, being unrealistic and overly optimistic.
Depressed people are often quite accurate or realistic in judging their impact on events and also in making other kinds of judgments about themselves. So they seem to perceive their own abilities fairly realistically, and they perceive themselves the way they're perceived by others. They tend to perceive the impact they have on events accurately, and they don't seem to overestimate the likelihood with which positive events will happen to them or negative events will happen to them in the future.
Monkeys who are stress-prone, who are likely to show depressive behaviors under extreme circumstances, under less extreme circumstances are more vigilant than their counterparts. They pay more attention to subtle changes in their environment. They pick up very subtle social interactions more quickly. If they are effective at coping, they can see potential danger signals well before other members of the group. And if these behaviors are used in a positive fashion, they can be both to the advantage of the individual and the group as a whole. On the other hand, that same individual may be at risk for showing extreme depression under conditions of much greater stress. So it all depends on what the environmental circumstances are, whether this tendency is adaptive and useful or whether it can become a problem.
If we think about the whole depressive reaction as kind of a psychobiological response where one steps back and sort of focuses on oneself and what's going on and kind of reevaluates. In that sense, depression, at least in mild forms, may be a positive response. It may allow people to reassess what they're doing, try to think realistically about what they're doing, and possibly make some changes so that things might go better in the future.
That's life. That's what all the people say. You're riding high in April, shot down in May.
Happy Valley has not been so happy these days. The town has recently been rocked by a series of grisly murders and the discovery of a child sex ring.
That's life. Funny as it seems.
Based on the complaints of patients like Heidi Summers, Jim Goodwin is now being investigated by the state of Washington.
But I don't let it get me down.
He is charged with incompetence and unethical behavior. A public hearing later this year will decide whether Jim Goodwin will lose his license to practice psychology.
I'm not in a conflict with anybody. I really am not. I think the world's in a conflict with me. I'm not the one who's jumping all over me. I'm not the one who's saying that I cram things down people's throat. I mean, I'm not the one that brought the lawyers into it. I'm not the one that got into the fight with all this. I'm just doing my job. I've been doing my job for years like this, but all of a sudden a bunch of people started dropping on me. And this is what's kind of come out of all of this. But I am like a typical person on Prozac. I'm not as aggressive as I used to be. I was a lot more aggressive. I was a Marine in the old days. Right now, I'm more of a pussycat.
That's life. And I can't deny it. I thought of quitting, but my heart just won't buy it. And if it rains, come next July.
Eli Lilly recently announced that the Prozac consumption in Wenatchee is the same or even less than in the rest of the country.
And die.